Welcome and thank you for joining today's webinar session. My name's Seanette and I'm here with Joe McBurty. On this session, we will run through some of the latest enhancements we've made to the service charge functionality. Before we jump into today's session, one of the things I'd like to draw your attention to is on the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. Once you've logged into Re-Leased, there is an in-app icon. And that will display the latest updates and announcements we've made. So if you click on the icon, if there's a latest announcement, that icon will be red. At the moment it's green because we've clicked on it before. So once you've clicked on the icon, it will show you product updates and any announcements we've made about the knowledge base articles and videos. So if you click on the product update, this will just give you a high-level summary about the enhancement. As you can see, on the 12th of November, we released budgets by area enhancements. So if you then click on Learn More, this will take you to the actual article itself as it sits in the knowledge base. So this is the area, and these are the topics that we're going to run through today on the webinar session. So one of the first areas that I wanted to show you was if you go to Settings, Maintain User Roles, and then if you go into any of your user roles, and then under Property Permissions, if you click on the little arrow, we've introduced two new functionalities where you can limit who has access to approve the budget and who has access to reconcile the budget. So that's the first area. The second area I just wanted to show you is if you go to a property, you will notice that what used to be called service charge is now called property charges. And the reason behind that is if you click on property charges, this actually contains the service charge budget, but it also contains other areas like direct on charging and utility meter readings. So we have rebranded and renamed that tab. If you click on budgets, one of the other changes is you can now see the type of budget on this summary page. So if you've previously set up budgets by tenancies and you've also introduced budgets by areas, it now displays that in this summary tab. I'm now going to hand you over to Jo, and she'll go through some of the other changes that we've recently made.
Thanks, Seanette. Okay, so if we go into our budget, one of the things that we have done is we have introduced a new tab here called the Client Contribution tab. And this is when your budget is in draft mode, it's available immediately, and it's based on the budget figures. So what you'll see here is your total budget figure, and then this screen shows you the top part is any under or over recovery that is due to your percentages not adding up to 100. Plus, it will show you what the client will be liable for here because an area is vacant, either for the full period or part of the service charge period, or it will also show you what the client is liable to pay for any tenant concessions. For example, this tenant has a fixed amount of 12,000 that they pay, and this is the excess based on the budget that the client is likely to have to pay. And this just basically totals up, giving you here your figure for your total client contribution. And we will be coming back to have a look at this shortly. The next thing that we have changed is the budget notes, which you can see down here and can go on certain reports, and that you set in here. The size of this field has been increased to 1,500 characters, just to allow you some more space to type whatever notes you need to. The next thing that we have changed is we have given you the ability to enter a negative amount on a budget line. So in this example, it's just for concessions for mole income is how we've shown it here. So previously on budgets by area, it wasn't possible to add a negative budget line. So now we've included that. Right, so the next piece of functionality that I'm going to show you comes when you approve your budget. If we approve, and what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to just approve this budget, and I'm going to replace my line items. So there hasn't really been any changes in this area at the moment. So I am just going to accept that I'm happy with all the information that it's going to update on my tenants' service charge templates, and I'm going to save all and approve. And now we see the next new piece of functionality that we have. So we now have the ability, once you have approved the budget, it will take you straight to your client contribution tab that I've just gone through, and you will see you have a nice green button where you can create a repeating invoice. And what this will do is it will create your repeating invoice to your client so that you can charge the client for what is expected to be the under recovery based on the budget. You don't have to do this. So if you don't want to charge your client throughout the year, you have enough funds in the service charge, or it's agreed that you're not going to, you just don't have to press the button. But if you do want to charge your client throughout the year, you press the button, and what it is doing, it will default to assuming that you are going to charge your client every month. So it defaults here to being every 1 month, and it defaults here to showing 1/12 of the annual figure that you, or the budget figure that you need to recharge to your client. You can change it here. So what we can do is we can change it. So for example, if you wanted to charge on a modern like quarterly basis, you can change the frequency here. You do have to manually adjust the unit price here. So this is the amount that's going to be charged each occurrence. It's not the annual figure, this is the each occurrence. So this would be the monthly figure. So to get it up to quarterly, I'd have to multiply it by 3 if I wanted to change that. Especially if you're changing the date, and you may need to change the next invoice date anyway, because you always want this to be the next one that's due. So as I'm doing this today, being in November, I would set this to be the 25th of December, and it was going to charge it quarterly on the 25th of December. This is a bit of a tricky example to show you, because I'm showing you on an old budget. So this end date defaults to being the budget end date. And because I'm doing it for an old budget, we have already passed that date. But if we just assume that our budget ended for the next year, that would be 2020. So I would be charging in 2020, and my budget is ending, and this repeating invoice will basically stop repeating at the end of the budget, and then you can go through the same process again next year to charge the repeating invoice there. I'm not going to save that. But that's just a way that a nice easy way that from the approval process you can automatically get your repeating invoice created. Once you've created it, the button turns to black, I think, and you can view it. You can also view it from the normal place where you can see all your other repeated invoices, but it's just neatly shown here, and you can edit it if you need to. Right. Also, once you have approved your budget, you get this other new tab, which is called Approved Templates. So if I click on this tab now, and this is basically the information as to what you have updated onto your tenant templates. So in this case, it's the service charge template. And it basically shows you the information so we can see the amount that was put to each template. We can see the chart of account that was used, the ledger that was used, and that we chose to replace the line item and what the description was. This is just so that you always know what was updated against your tenants as a result of approving the budget. And this will just help, because obviously it is possible to go into the tenant and manually change the information in there. And if that has happened, you can always come back here to see that when you approved the budget, these are the figures that were updated onto the templates as a result of the approval. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Right, so the next, actually, I just want to roll the budget over. Not that there's any change in this, but just so that I can show you something in a moment. 30th of the 9th, 21. Okay, I'm just going to roll it over it as at the same amount, just because I want I just want the new rolled over budget. I'm going to go back into the existing one. Okay, so the next piece of different functionality that we have is, you can see we have a lock button. This used to be called close, and the lock and close, it has the same functionality. So if I press the lock button, you'll see we have a lock date. Now, the idea of the lock button is that when you are ready to start reconciling your service charge, what you will do is lock the service charge. And by locking the service charge, and you can select the date you want to lock it at, what you're not doing is you are probably not going to want to enter the budget end date in here. You'll potentially want to enter today's date as it's defaulting. And what this would mean is that any new income or expense invoices that are raised after the lock date, so physically raised after the lock date, that have a date that means they would normally be included in the service charge, once it's locked, they won't be included. And you'll be able to, I'll show you in a minute where you can see what invoices have been entered after your lock date. And this just gives you a fixed position, so that if other people are entering invoices, your service charge position isn't changing as you're trying to do all your checks to reconcile the service charge. Sorry, I've just seen one question that comes in to say you don't have to lock, do you? And you do have to lock, because you do not get the reconcile button until you've locked it. So the idea is when you're ready to reconcile, you press the lock button. You would potentially want to enter today's date. And that means as of today, I've decided, as far as I'm aware, I've got all the invoices in that I've waited for. And anything that comes in after, I'm going to deal with in next year's budget. And that will lock the service charge. So even if additional invoices are entered, your income reports, your expenditure reports, and your reconciliation won't change. If you have locked it, so I'm going to lock as of today. If I wanted to unlock it, you can see I've got an unlock button, and I can unlock it at any time, but by unlocking it will let in any invoices that have been created after the lock date, and they'll all go into the service charge, into the reconciliation. And this kind of brings us on nicely to having a look at quite an exciting new piece of functionality, which is the service date. So we now have a new piece of functionality on invoices, and it's called the service date, and it's an additional date. And if I just, what I'm going to do is I am going to add a new expense invoice, and I will put it to repairs and maintenance. So, see, and we will do Fitzgerald Builders. Okay, so I'm going to put that the invoice date is 2020. Okay, so the invoice date that I might have just received an invoice might be dated Friday, and the due date might be dated next Friday. However, this let's just put maintenance for October. So this type of invoice, you can see the issue date is last Friday, it's due next Friday, but it relates to maintenance in October. And in this scenario, you would potentially want to enter a service date, and the service date would be a date in October. And what this will mean is it could push the invoice into the different service charge year. And I've now temporarily forgot what date my service charge ran from and to. Seanette, can you remind me, or are you not sure?
I can tell you it runs from the 1st of October to the 30th of September.
So what I'm going to do is put this, sorry, I'm going to change, and this is to do with maintenance for September. And that will be for, I don't know, £200. And thank you, Seanette. And maintenance is that's one. And if I save and approve that, so you can see we can still have the issue date of the invoice. We know what the due date is, and these are what will be used for when we can pay the invoice. But what we have is just this additional service date, and the only effect that this new date has is that it's an overriding date for the service charge to look at to decide which service charge period to put the invoice in. So you can leave the date blank, and if the date is left, if the service date is left blank, then for expense invoices, it will continue to use the issue date, and for income invoices, it will continue to use the due date. And this is available, the service date is available on income invoices and credit notes, and expense invoices and credit notes. So just to confirm, you don't have to use it. Also, it is a setting that doesn't even have to be turned on. So if you do not think this is of interest or of use to you, you can actually turn the service date off. And I'm just going to duplicate this so I'm not losing that. And to turn the setting off, if we go into our company and on invoicing, you can see we have this new on-off button for service date. So if it's turned off at company level, I won't even see the service date on an invoice. So if it's not available, if it's not relevant to you, you can turn it off. And by turning it off, this date will disappear from your invoice. So if you find that you haven't got the service date and you want it, it's company details, invoice settings, and the service date will switch it on and off. And I've got a feeling that it's on as default for everybody, and you may have noticed this just popping up recently. So another thing to note, so for expense invoices, you can enter the service date when you create the invoice. For the automatically raised, I'm just going to save that, for the automatically raised income invoices, the default at the moment is for the service date to be left blank. And at the moment, the time that you can edit it is when you're reconciling. You may want to move the first or the last invoice and use the service date to move the first or the last invoice raised throughout the service charge period, either back or forward, in or out of a particular service charge year. It is possible to change the service date on an invoice that has been paid. So that is one of the few fields that is always editable. And the reason for this is because a lot of the time you will be wanting to use it during reconciliation to move an invoice from one year to another. And it's probably quite likely that your invoice will be paid or your credit note allocated. So that will work absolutely fine from there. I'm just going to quickly go back into my budget. Sorry. Oh, here we are. Okay. So that's the service date. And I'm now going to take you through and look at some of the new reports that we have. So we have some new reports and some new enhancements to existing reports. So I'll try and take you through these logically. So once you have approved your budget, you have this new report here. So when you approve your budget, you had all your service charge certificates, which shows you the breakdown for each tenant based on the budget. This particular new one, we can run portrait or landscape. And what this does is this basically gives you what the client's liability is likely to be. So if we just open that. Sorry, I'm just moving it up here. So what we can see here is it looks very similar to the client contribution tab, and it's just basically showing you that there's no under or over recovery, that this is what we looked at on the client contribution tab. This tenant K has a fixed amount of 12,000 and there's an excess due to the client of 3,420, and unit 6 is vacant for the whole period. So there's that, and this is the total client contribution. So you could use this to accompany your your one-line charge that you're charging to your landlord. So you can basically, like, you've got the information broken down here, is what I'm saying, so that they can always see what they're paying for. So we didn't have this visible to the client previously. So that's the new one, which is the service charge client certificate. And just to confirm, that's only available once you have approved your budget. We also have an additional client statement, which is available after you've reconciled, which looks very, very similar, but it's based on actual figures. So once you reconcile your budget, you get your tenant statements, which basically shows you their portion of the expenditure, what they've paid so far, and the balance in charge. And there's a similar version for the client once you've reconciled as well. The next report, we always had the budget versus actuals report, but we've made some changes to this report. And what you can now do, which you couldn't previously do for service charge by areas, so you'll now see where you have an actual figure, there's a link, you can click on the figure and have a look at the breakdown, so what makes up that figure. So there we get our list of invoices making up our 3,000, and we can again click into the invoice. So if you're familiar with the service charge by area, by tenants, which was the original service charge functionality, that functionality was available in there, and we've just brought the same functionality into service charge by areas. Right, so the next report I am going to have a look at is our service charge income report. We have a couple of changes on this report. Here we are. And what this report now does, so we have an additional column showing the service date. So if you have a service date set on the invoice, it will be shown in that column along with the issue date and the due date. It will also show you, here we are, which tenants have any concessions, so that you can see if there's any reason why they're not paying the amount that might be their actual portion of the budget. And just please excuse all the £1 shown in our test data. The next thing that we can look at is there's a new section at the bottom, which are invoices and credit notes with a status of draft or waiting approval. So you can see here that these have not been approved. So it's just a reminder for you that you might need to approve them. And if we had an income invoice that was raised after, yeah, no, that's right. Sorry about that. I'm thinking expense invoices. Yeah, okay. So I'm now going to flip back to talking again about the service date and how we potentially can use that to move something between periods. If we have a look at the 1st of September, I thought we only had 3 invoices included in, 25th of December, sorry, 1st of October. Okay, sorry, that's not a good example. I'll do it on an expense invoice, sorry. Okay, so just to go back to say that the 2 changes on the income report are the service date, the showing any tenant concessions against the tenant, and a new section at the bottom showing anything that's draft or waiting approval. If we now flip back to our expense report, we've had some changes on this as well. Okay, so we should have a few invoices in here. Right, so for this, we have some new sections at the bottom. So we've got, again, invoices or credit notes that are either draft or waiting approval that belong in the budget. And here we've got our invoice or credit note that was entered after the budget was closed. And here we have one that was entered after the budget was closed. So what you can do to let that in, you can reopen the budget and reclose it to bring it back in. And this new section down here, it shows you any income invoices or credit notes that have been coded to an expense chart of account code. The functionality as it stands at the moment is that expenditure for the reconciliation and reports is only included if it's on an expense invoice. So we have seen certain people using an income invoice and code it to an expense chart of account to reduce that. But for the budget to understand this, we would need to raise an expense credit note. So this is basically telling you that this is not going to be included in your service charge reconciliation. So you would need to take action and raise a credit note to get this into the service charge. So what I would do is I would raise an invoice to move it out of the electricity recharge and a credit note to get it into the right budget figure. So just to clarify, our expenses are only looking at expense invoices. They're not looking at income invoices coded to an expense chart of account. And we have got some help and information available that we can send out to anybody who has that sort of scenario that wants to know how to handle it. We can send out some information to you on that. So now, if we look at the service date, so I can see here that my budget starts in October, and what I want to do is, can we just assume that this, instead of saying relates to cleaning in October, it related to cleaning in September? So because my budget starts on the 1st of October, I'm seeing something in here because my invoice is dated November. But if it was cleaning for October, if I go and edit my invoice, so let's just say that it was September, we actually don't want this in our budget. So if I put a service date of the 30th of September, it should push it out. And if I go back to my property, into my budget, and if I go back to my expense report, I should, now I've only got one item in there because I've used the service date to move it out. I can also do it the other way to push it into the next year. So for example, and I'm picking bad examples. So what I'm going to do now is my budget ends the 30th of September 2020. I am going to edit this. And if I'm going to put this to be December. So that should push it out of this year. Quickly go back into here. Budget. So if we go back to our expense report, so I'm looking at the 2019 to 2020. Can you see I've now pushed that out of here? And if I run this report, oh, I haven't approved the other budget. Sorry, let me just approve the rolled over budget. Just quickly approve it, and I'm just going to skip and approve it. And if I now, so I'm now in the next year's budget. So if I look at the expense report for the following year's budget, can't remember what one I pushed forward.
I think it was maintenance.
This one?
Yeah.
Yes, that was the one. Thank you. Sorry, Seanette. And this is the one that has been pushed forward to the next year. So if we look at this, yeah, so we've got our service date of December 2020, which previously was in the previous year's service charge. So that's how you can move things easily between each year. And just to let you know that you can run this report for the different years, so that you can see this is the previous year where it was in and is now moved out, and it's moved into the next year, the next year's budget. And there it is in the next year's budget. And that is everything that I was going to cover today. I think I'll hand you back to Seanette in case she can think of anything that I've missed.
There's one more that you might have missed.
Sorry.
That's okay. So if you go to your reports, it's the budget v actual report.
Oh, okay.
So now we have the ability to drill down into any of the actual costs. If you want to know how that's made up, if you click on it, it will give you a list of all the expense invoices.
Yeah, I think I did do that.
Oh, sorry.
But maybe I didn't. Maybe I dreamt it.
Apologies. Thank you all. Those are all the latest changes that we have made to the service charge functionality.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And thank you all for joining.
Thank you.